Hey there, let's jump into one of my favorite techniques, engraving. Whether you're a beginner in the page stage or an experienced foamsmith in the night stage, this technique is one of the most valuable techniques for taking you from ordinary to extraordinary. And there's a few key tricks to learn to save you time, avoid common mistakes, and keep you from getting engrave situations. Engrave? Okay, let's dive in. With engraving, there's a few key things to cover. Sharp blade, trace it, everything shows, steady depth, deeper the cut, wider the gap, bring on the heat. Alright, first things first, a sharp blade. I highly recommend an X-Acto knife. Once again, have spare blades, sharpen and hone your blades often. I'd recommend an X-Acto knife, and for really fine details, if you're able to get one, I'd recommend this amazing X-Acto knife pen. Super small, fine, sharp blade, great for doing little engraving details. Alright, trace it before you cut. Anytime you're going to be doing these engraving details, it's very important to draw it out first, because you can always draw over or go over with a different pen, different colored pen, but once you get in there with the blade, everything shows up. Once you go in there with the knife, even the smallest little nick or anything like that will expand and show up on your product. So once again, be very careful when you're going with a knife to be very precise and very accurate and meticulous about the cuts that you're doing. Okay. Next key thing is to maintain a steady depth. Now to do that, I like to use my hand grip to be able to determine the depth that I'm cutting at. Instead of holding the pen like normal like this, just drop your middle finger down a little bit further, and you can use that to kind of determine, your depth for cutting, right? My finger just runs along the top of the foam as a guide, affecting the depth of the blade. The deeper the cut, the wider the engraving gap will be, so that's where this handhold really comes into play. It allows you to be able to determine how wide the engraving gap is going to be, just depending on where you position your hand along that blade and how deep into the foam you're going. Last and definitely not least, bring on the heat. So this is how you're going to really make that engraving stand out and really come to life. Is you're going to grab your heat gun, you're going to kick it on high, and watch the magic happen. Alright, so that's the key steps. Now for your action item, I want you to practice by taking the hearts that we did in the previous beveled lesson. On one of them, I want you to do a crisscrossing pattern using this new engraving technique. And on the other one, I want you to try to practice your depths by doing lines, gradually going from thinner to thicker gaps. So that would be shallower to deeper cuts. Alright, so to recap, remember, sharp blade, super important. Trace it before you cut it. Everything shows up, so make sure that you're careful when you're cutting. Maintain a steady depth using that finger grip I showed you. The deeper the cut, the wider the gap. And lastly, bring on the heat. Alright, that's it for this one. I'll catch you in the next lesson. Cosplay on, my friends.